das andere.
Und am besten machst du heute nochmal Tassenpromo, ne? Ich
Ja,
glaube, das
klar.
Tu hatte jetzt noch kein Tassenpromo-Video hochgeladen.
Ja.
Ich hoffe, ich habe es ihm auch geschickt. Ich glaube schon.
Doch, ich habe schon, das habe ich bei Twitter gesehen.
Ja.
Aber wir machen das nochmal. Wir haben das ja hier.
Gut, gut. Okay, Intro mache ich dann hinterher. Christoph, during the World Cup in Qatar, many journalists and supporters showed off about being able to watch more than one game in person, but you didn't go to Qatar and you did manage to do the same. You went to the Ruhr area on Saturday and you saw 2 games.
Yes.
Tell us all about that.
Yes, I did. I went to see Bochum against Leipzig. That was on 3:30 German time. And afterwards, I rushed to Dortmund to see Borussia win 6-1 against Cologne. And both games were terrific for different reasons. But let's start at the Westfalenstadion, because there was a kind of excitement I haven't seen for a long time in Dortmund. It was really, there was something in the air. And if you combine it with what happened on Sunday, when Bayern was defeated at Leverkusen, nobody could know that at that time. But so there was a sense that there is a real chance for Borussia Dortmund to win the German championship. And that was fantastic to see. And yeah, I think we should talk about this, the situation at the top of the table, and we probably, before we later on come back to my little trip to the Ruhr, we should start at Leverkusen, actually, because Bayern lost, as I said. They lost for the 3rd time this season. Before they were defeated in Augsburg and Mönchengladbach, and now Leverkusen. And that was under crazy circumstances, and it caused a lot of questions. But let's start with the crazy circumstances. I don't know what you think, which kind of lifeline the VAR handed to Tobias Stieler, the referee, who saw it all wrong.
Yeah, so Tobias Stieler twice gave a yellow card to Amin Adli for simulation, and twice was told by the VAR that he got it completely wrong and awarded a penalty instead, and of course chalked off that yellow card as well. Adli seemed to see the funny side, maybe because he got the right result. Tobias Stieler even turned up on German television and said, yeah, you know, I got it all wrong, but the VR really helped me. So thank you to Cologne. Thank you to the basement in Cologne for rescuing my behind. I'm not sure it was that crazy because it was twice the right decision. It was actually a straightforward decision. What was crazy was that Tobias Stieler didn't just not award a penalty, but actually confused the situation with a dive. I would say I have some sympathy for the second one, because Adli is trying to sort of look for the contact. He's exaggerating a little bit, but unfortunately, from Bayern's point of view, Dayot Upamecano is completely out of control and just kind of sliding along in the box, and then you can't really have any excuses. The first one was Benjamin Pavard stepping on the heel of Adli and actually taking his shoe off in the process. And Robert Andrich was very funny. Don't know if you saw this. Christoph, after the game, said, if this really was a dive, and Adli managed to take off his own shoe in the process. He should star as a magician. Not so much pulling ahead, not so much pulling a rabbit out of the hat, but pulling your own foot out of a shoe, which is a neat trick, but in this case was actually a foul. And Bayern were 1-0 up from a Joshua Kimmich shot, but they didn't really create a lot of chances. Leverkusen had better chances, and Bayern only really got going once they were 2-1 down with 15, 20 minutes to go. Created 1 or 2 good chances, didn't take them. And in the end, which was quite interesting, I thought, everyone said, yes, we deserve to win, to lose this game. We were poor. Leverkusen were more aggressive. We didn't create much. We didn't have a good game, and that's why Leverkusen lost. Both Julian Nagelsmann and Thomas Müller made the point. So Bayern gracious in defeat, but now 2 weeks to chew on that and to cook in their own juices as they have to get over that defeat ahead of the big game, ahead of the game against Borussia Dortmund. So the worst possible way to enter into the winter break, sorry, not the winter break, the worst possible way to get into the international break. But from Leverkusen's point of view, they did all the kind of things that we don't readily associate with Leverkusen. They were super aggressive. They fought really hard. They were efficient. They played a real good collective game. And they did so on the back of a tricky game on Thursday against Ferencváros with very little time to recover. So very impressive from them, but not so impressive for Bayern. Christoph, what did you make of the discussion afterwards? I don't know if you saw it. They were talking about Bayern's formation. Julian Nagelsmann had to change things. Cancelo was playing in a wing-back position, but was a little bit in the wrong position. And they changed from defending with 3 to defending at 4 after 10 minutes, but they still build up with 3. Was the confusion just a lack of appreciation from the commentators, including Michael Ballack, or was it symptomatic of this bigger sense of not maybe confusion, but a Bayern team who are still not 100% sure all the time what Nagelsmann wants of them, and maybe sort of just need a little bit more time or too much time to adjust to his ideas? What was your feeling?
I found it interesting that especially Michael Ballack, as the co-commentator, brought it up during the game and also afterwards when he was in a discussion with Julian Nagelsmann, saying more. Let me say it in words he didn't use, but he was kind of saying that Julian Nagelsmann is a tinker man because he's tinkering around with the formations, and that a good Bayern team needs some a structure where they can rely on and where they feel well, and where they have their strengths and not so much changing. So it was actually already after it was already after 10 minutes when Nagelsmann decided to switch from a back 5 to a back 4. But because it was so loud in Leverkusen, or for whatever reason, it took some time until all of the players, including Cancelo, knew about this tactical switch. So that was I don't know if that was really the talking point of this game. I think there was another aspect that Julian Nagelsmann brought up and that I found interesting. He was complaining about his team not to play as a team, because he was saying we were doing too much individually, individual defending, individual attacking, and so on, and that his team didn't have the cohesion that he would like to see on the pitch, and that was obvious. And also he was more or less complaining about a kind of lack of emotion that his players were showing, and that's something. So what kind of feeling do you get when you see this Bayern team? They can produce very impressive performance, and they already did this season, but they are also in other moments, in other games, in part of games where they kind of lose it for a while, and that has to do with how much you're into it, how concentrated you are, how passionate you are. And I think to have consistency in this part of the game that has to do with emotion, that's the big story in a way for me, what's going on this season and this up and down in this part. I don't know. I mean, you're the Bayern expert, and you've got your ear on the rails, but I don't know what you make of it. Is that a fair to say? Do we have to talk about the emotional connection as a team?
I'm not quite as despondent to have my ear on the rails yet, but I think I understand what you're saying. I don't know, Christoph, if you can separate these two things. I wonder if this lack of emotion or this individual sort of incohesive, atomized Bayern team, anemic a little bit, is not also to do with this other issue that they feel that they're not quite sure what is this system, is this our best system. They seem to be kind of a little bit not in tune with each other, and I think that's what we've seen throughout the season, that you feel that Nagelsmann is pushing certain buttons, and sometimes it works, but sometimes it doesn't, and somehow the team don't find enough quality and maybe also attitude independent of the tactical setup to then just win the game anyway. I mean, we used to have teams in the past that it almost felt as if it didn't really matter what kind of formation and what kind of tactics used to be picked. They would somehow win it when they were playing in the Hitzfeld era, for example. Even in Kovac first season, you could see the team don't really enjoy it, but they were so strong and they would just find ways of scoring. But maybe this Bayern team, especially with No Choupo-Moting, I think he was a big miss today, as we record this on a Sunday evening. Perhaps they give themselves less margin for error to then find themselves, conceding goals and not winning games. I'm trying to think what happens if they don't concede these two penalties. If either the VAR is asleep, or there is no VAR, or they just don't commit these stupid fouls. Is this a kind of game where it's a 1-0, they're not really playing so well, but Leverkusen open up and then Bayern hit them on the break and we think, okay, didn't really convince us, but it's Bayern and this is what they do. But of course it didn't happen because they gave away these stupid mistakes and they didn't defend well. And then you find yourself perhaps contributing to your own problems. But I think you can tell that I'm a little bit at a loss to explain some of these issues, because every time we feel that Bayern have made a huge step forward this season, after the game against Union, for example, then after the game against PSG in the Champions League, then we get a performance like the one against Leverkusen where we feel something isn't quite right. And it's very unusual for a Bayern coach to accuse his team of not having the right attitude, the right emotion when they're playing such an important game, as Thomas Müller mentioned, that they all talked about the fact that this was a hugely important game and they were up for it, at least in theory, but somehow can't make it happen. But the good news is that in Borussia Dortmund, we have a team that might actually, for once, take advantage of these Bayern problems. In the past, Bayern could do all these things and still win because the teams below them are even more inconsistent or just cannot get the results themselves. But as you mentioned earlier, you saw Borussia Dortmund beat beat Köln 6-1, and it had almost a bit of a championship, here we come kind of vibe, even though they didn't know at the time that Bayern would lose and that Dortmund would take over the league table ahead of their trip to Munich.